This is the car that my dad must have doing most of his traveling in when he was an outside salesman. And I'm sure his dad sent him the money for that. And this is on my mother's side, and they're from Holland. And he's the one that's the builder, and he built that house. He built his own barn. They came from Holland, but they were in a Dutch settlement, so he didn't have to learn English. And so he just spoke Dutch to all his friends. But my grandmother, she learned English a lot faster than he did.
And the house in the back?
The house is the house he built. This is on the farm. And this is the one that's standing is the girl that died at 15. And then the one that's sitting down by the cow is her aunt, my mother's sister. And then that's my sister, and her name was Alice.
And what was the farm?
What was the farm?
Yeah, when you say the farm, who created that farm?
It was the farm that my grandfather lived in. My mother's mom and my mother's dad.
That's a pretty rough house there.
I don't think that was the house. That was a shed. That was part of the barn.
Okay.
Like the chicken coop or whatever. We would when after we got our money and we had our great big Hudson, we would go and visit. We lived in the city, and my grandparents lived on this farm, and there would be all 6 of us and Mom and Dad, and it was 50 miles from where we lived, and on a Sunday we'd go and visit them, and no telephone. We didn't tell them we were coming. And when we came, my grandmother would go out and get a chicken and chop its head off, and we could see it dancing all around the farm after its head was off. And she plucked it, and she cooked it, and it was the best chicken I've ever eaten in my life. And she fried it all in butter that she made. And she would make shroompies, which was egg white, and made a wonderful cookie. She was a wonderful cook. And my grandfather made smoked meat, and he made it through the chimney that came through the house, and he had to pull out a few bricks, and that's where he smoked it. And when we came, the first thing we did, we would ask Opu, which was grandma in Dutch, and we asked Opu for a piece of meat, and she'd cut off the smoked meat, and as fast as she could cut it, we were eating it.
Okay, what other pictures have you got?
Let's see the ones I want to show you. This is the house that my grandfather built, and that was the home I was raised in.
That's impressive.
And when he first bought it, it had 2 verandas on each side, but it didn't take Mom long to make one veranda into a sunroom. And because she had maids to clean and do everything and cook, she could sit in this sunroom with about 200 plants all wrapped around her and a desk in the middle of it. And she would write books, poetry that was put in the newspaper, and read books. Everything in her life was attached to reading and writing books, etc.
Who was that in the doorway?
I have no idea.
It's quite a house. It looks like a church.
Yeah, it was a very, very large house. And then I'll show you one thing about this house that was made different. If you look at it closely, you'll see outside steps going up at the back side of the house. And it went up into, and when the war broke out, the Englishmen came in the Air Force, and at the airport, they had all kinds of Englishmen were in the war learning how to fly airplanes. And so we had all left home by this time. So my grandfather made several apartments, and that was one of them. And you can see how the steps goes up and the great big deck in front of it. And of course, Dad loved it because they all came from England, and so did Dad. So they had a lot in common. So after our young peoples, when they first started making apartments, my husband had gone overseas, and I was living at home, and that's where I had my child. My husband was in England when I had him. Had electricity, telephone, everything. Yeah. But in the little town of Edam, where my grandparents lived, that little town did not have electricity or water. It was all in Saskatchewan. It was only 50 miles away from where we lived.
Okay.
And we had this great big Hudson, and so we drove there on Sundays.
Mm. I bet this house is in public records of the town.
It's all torn down.
But I mean, old photos. I bet it was in the newspaper.
Could have been.
Yeah, I bet they did stories on it.
I wouldn't know. These are pictures. Now we're really getting into the generations. War was on. My husband was overseas in the Air Force. And of course, I haven't even told you how I met him or anything. But anyhow, the war was on. And this is my after church on Sunday. And I don't know if they were all staying overnight or what, because my grandparents, here's my grandfather, who was the contractor.
From Holland.
From Holland, and that's his wife.
Right.
And her name is my name. And then in the background, from left to right, is my mother, my dad, my mother's sister, Nell, and my mother's sister's Lottie, and then her sister, Nell. And then at the bottom...
Poor Nell got her face cut off.
Yeah, they got their faces cut off. And then at the bottom is my twin sister and I. On the left is my twin sister, Lida, and that's Drieny. She's holding her son, Larry. That's 9 months older than my son. And
That's Larry?
That's Larry.
Looks like he's so cute. Looks like a girl.
No, it's a little boy. And then my son, and his name was Ori.
Oh. And
he was named after his father. But his father never saw him until he was 2 years old.
And Look at your hairdos. That looks like a lot of work. Doing all those curls.
We used to do our hair up in rags. When we were little, Mom did all our hair up at nighttime. And she used to, when she undid the rags in the morning, sometimes she'd really pull your hair, and we'd complain. And she said, it takes pains to be beautiful.
Boy, your grandfather is a stunning gentleman, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a big man, over 6 foot tall.
Good-looking guy. He looks like a movie star.
My mother was very attractive.
And his wife looks a little distracted in this picture. Your grandmother, she's in the camera, you could see her.
Yeah.
She was looking
tucked behind my hat.
It's a great picture.
And my mother, when we were young, living in this city, not on the farm anymore, we moved to the city. And whenever we went shopping, we had to wear gloves and a hat. We never can casually just go downtown. We always had to be dressed up.
I've heard about that. Wouldn't the gloves be dirty when you got back?
I got a drawer full of gloves.
Yeah.
Even yet.
Okay, what else have you got? These are great pictures.
There's a picture here in front of my house where I live now, and that's my brother, and he was the pastor of this church at Cedar Mill Bible Church, and that's why we moved here. And that's my twin sister on the left and myself on the right. And it's in front of my house. We live in a brick house.
Wow. Look at.
My twin sister and I looked alike, but we were nothing alike in personality.
Okay. And what was his name?
Albert John. He was named after my dad.
The last name?
Wollen. Wollen.
Okay. And he was a pastor at Cedar Mill Bible?
He was pastor for 33 years, I think you said.
the head pastor, or
He
just
was
one?
the head pastor. That's all you had was a pastor in those days. And then eventually, when he first started, the church was only 85 people. But as the church grew and as they built a new church, then he had assistant pastor, which is his brother-in-law.